Hi, I'm Femi Oke.
And I'm Omar Badar, and you're in the stream.
For the second year in a row, Japan has crowned a biracial woman the winner of a major beauty pageant. It's revived a conversation about race, xenophobia, and what it means to be Japanese.
Come closer and take a look.
This is about Miss World Japan 2016, and mainstream media often try to create a certain narrative and pick opinions that fit their narrative. But what do random Japanese people think about her?
でも日本人じゃないんですよね。ハーフみたいな感じですよね。
そう。インド人と日本人のハーフで、日本生まれての育ち。
なんかそれって日本人じゃなくてもいいんですね。っていうなんか印象がありました私の中で。
海外の血が入ってる人のお顔ってやはり綺麗だし、
ザ日本人みたいな人を想像してたっていうだけなので。
偏見はないですね。こういう人もいるんだって、多国籍な日本みたいなところもちょっと知れてもらえるのかなっていう感じも僕はしますね。偏見はないです。
Drum roll, please. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss World Japan, Priyanka Yoshigawa. It is so good to have you. Hello. It's been a while. You've had a few days for the enormity of this success to percolate. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Yes.
You're feeling
very,
good? Okay.
Yes, I'm grateful. Yes.
All right, grateful. There's more. We're going to pry some more out of you. We're looking forward to chatting and hearing more from you in just a bit, but sit tight for now.
Yep. Now, Ishikawa's win has renewed a wide-ranging discussion online about identity in Japan. But we want to know what you think, and you can join this conversation by tweeting us using the hashtag AJString.
Japan is frequently labelled as one of the most homogeneous countries in the world. So what impact does that have on minorities who live there, and conversations about discrimination? With us to talk about this in Yokohama, Baye McNeil. He is an author and columnist for the Japan Times. In Kobe, we have Edward Sumoto. He is the founder of Mixed Roots Japan. That's an organisation promoting dialogue about race and mixed identity in the country. Daibito Arudo is the author of Embedded Racism, Japan's Visible Minorities and Racial Discrimination. He's coming to us from Honolulu, Hawaii. And in Bangkok, Thailand, we have Yuta Aoki. He is a Japanese YouTuber and blogger. Great to have you here, everybody. Let me just show you this picture that we have of Priyanka. So that takes us back to last week and just being crowned Miss World Japan. Priyanka, there must be so many people around Japan who look at that and look at you and are inspired. When you think about all the young people out there in Japan who are inspired by you, how does that make you feel?
Well, it does. I feel the support that I'm getting, and people I can change things, so that makes me happy and grateful that I'm the person that's making the change.
Let me just bring in Edward here. Edward, the headlines, the international headlines, were all talking about Priyanka's background and her mixed heritage, and this is amazing, and people are getting very, very excited. But if we looked inside of Japan, from the inside out, how are conversations about race and discrimination, how are they had? Are they even had?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, the question of race and especially how different you look, how you want to identify yourself, that's always been there. And not to discount anything that the Priyanka or Ariana last year has achieved. And congratulations, Priyanka, for what you've achieved this time. There has been other trailblazers as well, like, for example, there's people like Mari Nakagawa, who became the first black-skinned, although she's Hafu as well, she's referred to as a black model here. She became the first model to walk a major fashion show here in Japan, which has always been dominated by mixed people, but not of her particular shade. So there's always things going on within Japan as well. I think I want to point out that although there's been a good impact as well, the English media, especially on the internet, has been a little bit lazy about this whole thing because they really recycled a lot of the topics during Ariana's time.
From the first time, yeah.
Yeah, and also from Priyanka's time too. I mean, they just recycle a lot of the stories, and sometimes it's just.
Given us an example of recycled, is there anything that's recycled and you just like you're face palming and thinking you have got this so wrong? Facepalm.
For example, Priyanka's news was great, but maybe even half a day after her winning the crown, there was already the same story saying, "Oh, on the internet, on this site," and it's like this really fringe, internet board that you would never really talk about if it was the same in the States. But people like to jump to conclusions that there's so many chatter online about, but you really have to take the time, as we're doing today, to hear from all sides of the story and all genders and all the kinds of people out there. So it's good. It's a Kickstarter, but I am a little bit disappointed that the same level of chatter is not happening in Japan because, first of all, maybe the pageants are not being paid attention to that much to begin with. So it'll be good if the same kind of conversation and culture of discussion and expression can take place also in Japan in Japanese.
Well, Edward, we got a video comment actually from a guy named Mickey who put up a video tackling racism in Japan 3 years ago, and he sent us a video commenting about why he put that video up and what kind of reaction he got to it. Check it out.
So the reason why I decided to make videos on LGBT issues or racism was because my coworkers and my students didn't know much about the issue, and they told me that they had never seen anything on TV about it. And that's what ultimately led to my decision to keep the video up on YouTube, despite the harassment toward myself and towards my coworkers, which I really feel bad about.
So, Yuta, I want to toss this to you. For those of us who live in the United States, the idea that racism would not be discussed on television seems almost entirely alien. What Mickey here is talking about is suggesting that really it's not part of conversation in Japan. What is your take on it? Do you think an average Japanese person thinks about race issues?
Not really. So it's not something we often talk about, racism. And if you just go for a drink with Japanese people, it's very, very rarely do they bring up the conversation of race. So it's definitely not something we talk about daily.
Yuta, can you explain why?
So if you are like 100% Asian, non-mixed Japanese people, you almost never have to think about race in your daily life. And when Japanese people, non-mixed, like Asian Japanese people, think about race is when they go abroad, for example. But as long as they don't go outside Japan, they don't really have to think about it because they are the majority and they're really, really the majority. So I think that's why.
Let me just bring in David-o. David-o, I'm going to bring you in via your two little girls here, pictures of when they were much younger. This is not a conversation that you could avoid living in Japan because of your youngsters, because they have mixed heritage. How did you talk to them about issues of discrimination and race, and did you see that firsthand?
Of course I did. Of course, everybody does who has to deal with it. When people say, well, it's not a matter of conversation, when we're involved, when people that are visible minorities in Japan, in other words, people that don't necessarily look Japanese, we have to deal with it in a way that says, no, we're Japanese and we're something else. We're not half, we're double. That's why I prefer the word half over double. The halves are free to claim the word for themselves, but I still think it's a better word to say we're both American or something else, and we're both Japanese. The fact that we can't do that in the media, for example, is part of the problem. But also part of the problem is when we have a very clear victory, like Ms. Yoshikawa has just had, people are quick to jump to say, well, how Japanese is she? It shouldn't matter. She's Japanese 100% like my daughters, like any other Japanese. Japaneseness is a matter of legal status, not of blood and not of appearance. That's what should be promoted in the conversation, and it isn't sufficiently being done that way.
So we have an interesting actually tweet from people who are complaining about the entire conversation around racism in the country. People like Naomi over here who says, what we have right now is racism against the Japanese. I feel oppressed seriously right now. Goes on to say, I just wish that Koreans and Chinese would respect their host country instead of trying to take it over. Baye, when you hear somebody who's complaining about racism in one breath and then in the other breath making really broad sweeping generalization about Koreans and Chinese, what do you make of that?
It's just another... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, David-o.
I'm very sorry. I didn't hear Baye's name being called. Sorry about that.
No
It's just a matter of people saying, well, It's reverse discrimination. How much reverse discrimination can the dominant majority do against the underrepresented, disenfranchised minority here? Taking over the country, bollocks.
Baye,
there's-
let me just bring in Baye because he was waiting patiently, and then we go to
Sorry.
Utah. Baye, go ahead.
Yeah.
What did you want to add?
No, I reiterate, bullocks. Yeah, I think that's ridiculous. I mean, if anyone who is a visible minority has a complaint or has a concern that they raise, that's often what's posed towards them. You should reserve your criticism of the country and just get along. Do your best to get along and not try to take over the country. I'm like, how are you trying to take over the country by lodging your concerns or voicing your concerns when you work here, you live here, you can contribute to society in a constructive and positive way. Why aren't you allowed to speak your voice and make your voice heard? So, I think that's bollocks.
I am listening to this. And
can I add something?
Utah, I really do want you to add something. But guests, have a think about this. I'm listening to this conversation, but I'm not hearing any examples of discrimination yet. Utah, go ahead.
So there's this very important piece of information that people are missing when they read this kind of tweet. So there's a small number of very vocal people in Japan who are essentially conspiracy theorists who they believe a certain group of people are trying to take over Japan or something like that, but they don't necessarily represent Japanese people, and this is very important because we don't believe in that kind of theory. So if you go to the West, people who believe in Jewish conspiracy or something like that, and those are those kind of people.
So Utah is saying,
please don't think that Japanese people think
these are
like
people
that.
on the edge. They do not represent Japan. Edward, go ahead.
Yeah, well, listen, there's, over there in the States, you have Trump supporters, and we have our, equivalent as well, and that's true in all countries. But I think everybody's brought up a really important point, and what's happening in Japan is that from a certain not so distant past, people have started confusing three very distinct and very important ways of thinking: race, nationality, and ethnicity. This is all mixed up here in Japan.
Break it down for us.
And that really, basically, you have the full genetic thing, and then you have the cultural thing, and then you have as Devita said, you have the full legal national status as well. But people tend to mix this up now. So one of the most popular way of insulting somebody or being racist against somebody in the recent years is by calling them anti-Japanese. So, for example, you have really weird stuff like the person I mentioned, Mari Nakagawa, when she wrote that she loves how her Afro hair is and, her other African roots. She really loves it just as much as her Japanese side. Then some troll on the internet said she's being anti-Japanese because she's saying something that's outside of the norm. What does it mean to be anti-Japanese, right? But it's all getting mixed up, and then also within the geopolitical setting, people find it easier to tie together the legal status of certain people. For example, the biggest scandal right now we have in Japan is amongst the several Hafu politicians we have. There's
and Edward, I'm just going to say for anyone who's
Yeah.
new to this term, Hafu means that you're from mixed heritage. It literally means
it's a Japanization
half.
of the word have something, right?
Yeah.
And she's Taiwanese Hafu. She's running for the position of leadership for the main opposition party, the Democratic Party. And people found out she actually didn't really relinquish her other nationality. And this is all becoming, it's building on what Yuta said about conspiracy and being anti-Japanese.
And there is a
illegal,
rule, and Ed, sorry to give notes to you because you know more about Japan than I do, but
No.
back in 1985, have a look here on my laptop, there's a change in the law that also required all dual citizens to make a declaration of choice. So you have to decide by the time you're 22, and you might have mixed heritage, you might have a number of different relationships with different countries, you have to decide, you have to pick, are you going to be Japanese or are you not going to be Japanese? Omar, where do you want to take us next?
It's interesting because when we talk about discrimination or racism, a lot of people might get the idea that we're talking about Japanese versus people who are foreign or who are mixed or from out of the country. But we actually have a lot of comments about what it really means to be Japanese within Japan. So we have Nikos over here who says, the Honshu inhabitants, that's the main island in Japan, consider themselves the center of Japanese identity and culture. Foreign coverage reinforces that perception. And then we have one more tweet over here that says, I was born in Okinawa, which was an independent country once. Japan gathers U.S. bases there and takes discriminatory policies. Baye, do you think that there is still a dispute over, even within Japan itself, over what it means to really be Japanese without even excluding the foreign issue?
Do I think there's a dispute over what it means to be Japanese?
Yeah, do you think that this idea of discrimination actually can still be confined within Japanese identity itself, not so much of somebody who's mixed with Japanese and being something else as well?
Well, I can't speak authoritatively to that, but I do have friends who are from Okinawa or who are of mixed heritage. But as far as the people who are recognized as Japanese nationalists being discriminated against, unless they are conspicuously different or there's some other way of identifying them as not being part of that Honshu that you mentioned, I'm not aware of it, but I guess someone else here on the panel could speak more definitively to that.
Let me just check in with Priyanka. Priyanka, has anybody asked you how Japanese are you, or do you feel Japanese? How do you deal with that?
Not really. Well, people do ask me what Japanese is like and how I'm like, how I feel representing my country, but I don't really get that kind of question.
Let me just share something with you. This comes courtesy of Baye. I have a look here on my laptop. Baye, what is going on here? I want you to describe it rather than me, because you set up a petition to stop this. Just explain to us what's going on and why it was disturbing for you.
Well, what we have here is a singing group, a doo-wop group, a Japanese doo-wop group known as Rats and Star.
Yeah.
And they perform in blackface, and they've been doing this for a number of decades. And recently, this was last year, they were due to perform in blackface on Fuji television. And I've been here for over a decade now, and I've been well aware of their presence. But at the time, I just considered it as, these gentlemen are aging, and soon they will, leave the scene and take this ignorant form of entertainment along with them. But what happened in this instance is that they were passing along these ideas of performing in blackface as paying homage to black people. They were passing it on to the next generation in the form of those young ladies that are in the photograph, known as.
So in the context of Baye, let's just cut to the chase because we only have a little bit of time left.
Sure.
In the context of Japan, is this racist?
No, I mean, as far as those performers are concerned, they don't consider themselves racist. They consider
Edward
themselves
was covering his face. When we showed this picture, Edward was like, oh no, why are you showing this picture? Edward, is this racist in the context of Japan?
Of course it's racist, but in the context of to be perfectly honest, in the minds of the Japanese people, they absolutely did not see it as racist because they thought it was. I mean, to quote the Rats and Stars, what they said was, we respect the black artists of Motown so much, that's why we decided to blackface ourselves. That was like 30 years ago.
Right.
And when they were actually on stage with the Motown guys, they glared at them and they realized that it was racist, but they kept on doing it, right?
Yeah.
So it's half conscious and a lot of unconscious and misguided racism as well, which exists here. And frankly, it's, as we've discussed today, there needs to be more of a culturalization of being able to express yourself and be able to talk about race issues or society in general. And that's also even lacking amongst the mixed people or even the foreign permanent residents over here. So we really have to get this conversation going.
So David,
it's a great start.
Help us understand this a little bit more, because what would look like racism from the outside is not necessarily racism from the inside, or there's more context to be given. What's more context you want to share with us?
Yes, look at it this way. Racism and racialization processes are not culturally based. They're procedurally based. The process is differentiation, othering, and subordination. That happens in every country and every society. Differentiation, where you say people look different or are different from us. It doesn't have to be skin color. It could be any type of marker, genetic or non-genetic. Othering is when you say, you're not part of our group. and subordination is where you say, okay, because you're not part of our group, we're going to treat you differently and probably in lower regard.
How are you treated
and that
in
sort
Japan,
of thing,
David?
I'm sorry?
How are you treated in Japan?
I'm treating it as more like a talking dog. Gosh, the white guy can speak Japanese. Right? I'm an anomaly. And that's before I get to my citizenship issues, of course. I've gotten used to it, of course. I knew I signed up for this when I took citizenship. I was hoping that taking legal status would offer me more legal protections in Japan. Unfortunately, it did not.
Right.
Yep. So, we've talked a little bit earlier about this whole concept of half or halfy, that the term being used. And we have here Risu, who wished Priyanka, saying from one halfy to another, congratulations. On the other hand, we have people who really don't like that term, like Selma, who says, people say you're not what you are. That also needs to stop using the term half. And Jay says the term half girl is bothersome, to say the least. Priyanka, when people say things like from one halfy to another, congratulations, what's the residue of that term with you, and do you think it needs to change?
Well, I get a lot of supported, but the term of saying half, I would say the word half is nothing negative. It's not. It's just a different term of saying mixed. So, it's like me being representing my country and me being Miss World Japan is a proof of this country being changing, and it's becoming international. So that's my point of view of my country.
Before you were Miss World Japan, last year there was Miss Universe Japan, Ariana Miyamoto. Yeah. Let me just play you a little clip from her, and we talked to her last year. Have a listen to what she has to say.
What does it feel like when you hear from people that you're not Japanese enough?
I ran for Miss Japan expecting some criticism, so it wasn't such a big surprise for me. But of course, those kinds of comments don't make me feel good, so I try my best to turn them into positive motivations.
How much does Japan embrace diversity?
How should I put this? I think we have a long way to go.
See, Yuta, I'm reading between the lines here. That's a very diplomatic answer, but it's not like nothing is happening in Japan right now. There's definitely been anti-hate laws passed. How are they going? Are they being used well?
Well, that law in particular is a very, towards a very specific kind of people. But I generally think it's a positive move that they picked half black Miss Miyamoto as a Miss Universe Japan last year, and this time half Indian Miss Yoshikawa as Miss World Japan. I think it's a very positive move, and I see a lot of a mixed race Japanese people, especially in Tokyo, and they have different experiences. Some of them have very bad experiences, but some of them are pretty doing well. So I think I'm not sure if it's becoming more accepting, but I see many different experiences.
David, do you see that Japanese life is changing, that the way Japan looks at minorities, looks at people from mixed heritage, just views the other people from around the world? Is that changing, or are you still going to be the pet talking dog?
I'm not going to say for sure right now because the jury is still out. The fact that Yoshikawa-san has actually won here, and it's a second time, when it doesn't matter anymore how she looks in terms of skin color or her ethnic background, then we'll say that progress has been made. She won because she qualified, and she actually did. She's a lovely lady, and congratulations, omedetou gozaimasu. And when that sort of thing doesn't matter anymore to Japan, then we're going to see real progress.
When it's not a headline and we don't do a show, then we're there.
Right. Basically, when we stop listening to racists and letting them set the narrative, saying, oh, well, how Japanese is she really? Can she represent us? Who is us? Questioning who is the us here and making it inclusive so that it doesn't matter how you look, but rather who you are and what you do for society.
David, stop talking for a moment, just so we can go full screen on Miss World Japan. Here we go. Miss World Japan, thank you so much for being on our show. And Baye and Davito and Yuta and Edward, and we are taking you all online to stream.aljazeera.com, where we will continue the conversation about race and discrimination and how Japanese view themselves as well. Stream.aljazeera.com. See you there. Thanks for watching. Hello everybody, it's good to have you back again. We are in the post show and I'm talking to guests who all live in Japan about their experiences about discrimination and race. Let me just show you here Baye. He was talking to Miss Universe Japan last year. Baye, could you smile any wider? I have a few copy editing.
I was blown away.
I have a few copy editing comments about your copy for this story. But when you met, I mean, this was very special. This was a first. You share your thoughts about this even being able to happen in Japan. How monumental was this?
I'm constantly surprised by the things that occur in Japan. I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier about the petition against Rats and Star. At that time, as Edward mentioned, maybe that that is viewed as racist. I mean, not viewed as racism in Japan, but at that time, it was nearly 5,000 people who signed a petition, and the vast majority of them were Japanese people. So that was also a surprise to me. So when things like that occur, when Japan brings to the forefront a woman of mixed heritage as Miss Universe Japan or Miss World Japan, it's a great thing, I think. And I think it's not because it's a sign that Japan is diversifying or changing some of its views, but the people who are able...
And then you can correct me, you can push back on me, but why isn't it a sign that Japan is diversifying? How is it possible that for 2 years in a row on major beauty pageants, the person who's selected to represent Japan is a person of mixed heritage? Is that not a milestone?
Because the public is not choosing these people. They're not selecting the winners. It's not the public that's making these selections.
Right.
If the public was voting, I would say yes. That's the case. But the public's not
yes. That is such a good point. If the public, okay, this is a tricky question. If the public were voting, Priyanka, the public in Japan were voting.
Yes, the public in Japan were voting.
Would you be wearing the crown and sash right now?
Well, we actually had the voting in our country, so, and that's how they judge too. Not that's like a
so Baye's
term
wrong
of
then.
Judging.
Baye's wrong. He's like you have the public vote behind you.
Yes, of course. I have all the support.
To a certain extent, yes.
To a certain extent, the public is involved in the voting process for the.
There was a Facebook vote as well and an
I can
online
hear you
vote as
right.
well, which yeah.
Yeah, there's a Facebook. Nobody argues with Facebook. Moving things along just moving things along just a little bit.
Moving things along to the legal front, where we have a lot of people who are commenting about the anti-hate speech law that passed in Japan. We have people who are commenting, don't think it's quite sufficient. So we have this tweet over here that says, it has been effective in reducing hate demonstrations, but it has many flaws, no penalties, and no measures against online hate speech. And we have Yonli over here who says, still now, hate speeches by election candidates are protected under the laws. Those should be regulated as well. Utah, do you think that we have sufficient protections at this point in Japan against hate speech, or do you think a lot more still has to be done?
I wouldn't say sufficient, but it was a first step. But before we didn't have, anything. We didn't have anything. But right now we have something.
So a small step in the right direction, but you think a lot more still needs to be done?
Probably. Also, maybe we need some kind of like a more anti-discrimination law, and something to protect the minorities in Japan, maybe.
Edward?
This whole issue of mixing up politics and racism issues has actually come to head with this exact law, actually, because on one hand, we have this people, like Yuta mentioned, very extreme people who have been making very hateful and even threatening comments. And actually, one of the leaders of this movement ran for governor just in the recent election in Tokyo, and he's allowed to do that without being penalized. And on the other hand, the same law actually hinted that it would prohibit demonstrations in front of the national diet, the Congress equivalent, basically, which totally mixes up what you can say politically against certain issues, like certain groups of people, or have a discussion about it. And also, discrimination is on another level, but even politically, these two are mixed up.
Edward, we have people, we heard from Naomi a little bit earlier in the show. We have another tweet from her saying, I value freedom of speech and civil liberties, and I don't want anyone to police my expression and threaten me. What do you say to people like Naomi? Could we possibly go too far in restricting free speech by going down the road of banning hate speech?
So free speech, if you continue, just like Bias, comment and the blackface example, if you just let free speech go along without any dialogue or education, you know who's going to end up the fool, the person who doesn't really have the right idea or just manifests itself in blackface or any other stupid comments. So free speech can be just an uneducated rambling, or it can be something that's built up with actual dialogue and so on. So there's a difference between completely saying you can't say this or that, but there's let's say this and that and let's have different ideas like we're doing right now.
Priyanka, I know you've travelled, you've lived in 3 different countries. Does that make you see Japan in a different way once you've been elsewhere? And how do you, when you go back to Japan, how do you see it? Does it seem like a country that's, how do you see it? I don't want to frame it for you, you frame it for us.
Yes, I lived in the States and in India and then came back to Japan. And yes, I've had a different point of view of seeing how Japan is and how people are different, and that, and I've been living in Japan most of my life, so...
how do people treat you differently? Because that's how you work out how is a country different, so how people treat you. So how do they treat you in India?
In India, they treated me as a Japanese, so I was treated as a foreigner in India.
Okay.
And same as in U.S.
And then
here
in Japan?
in Japan,
yeah.
In Japan, I'd be a Japanese as a mix. So I've been treated as a Japanese for 22 years.
Interesting. All right. Just because I love this advert, and then you can tell me your reactions, guess. I'm going to play an ANA advert. It's an airline advert, and it's hilarious, but in a hilarious, terrible way. I want to see what your reactions are to it, because I think this might be an indication of change. Have a look at this ANA advert.
Canada has more international flights nowadays.
Finally.
Next stop, Vancouver.
Next stop, Hanoi.
Exciting, isn't it?
You want a hug? Such a Japanese reaction.
Because I am Japanese.
I see. Let's change the image of Japanese people. Sure. Wanna go?
Yeah.
羽田から世界へ ANA.
All right, am I a bad person for laughing? That advert has been updated. That little bit at the end has changed. It is no longer there. But does that give us a little insight, Yuta, into, because even the ad mentions, like, this is how we are as Japanese and we're changing, and then it has like a caricature at the end. Yuta, help us unpick it from your perspective. What would you say about that ad?
Yeah, so this is a very good example of how Japanese people don't think about race in general. So it's very, if this was the United States, people would immediately realize this is a very bad idea to do, that kind of stuff. But since it's Japan and people don't think that kind of like imitating some racial features can lead to something very, very nasty, but we kind of like don't have the perspective. So that's why like that kind of expression is, just, I wouldn't say allowed, but people just don't realize that can be quite
here's an interesting thought. If you don't see that it's racism, you don't think you're racist, are you racist? Is it racism? Does that make sense?
That's a very profound question.
It is. I can't believe I actually said that. now everybody's laughing. Stop laughing, everybody. Occasionally I'm profound. Yeah, but if you don't, if 99% of the people around you do not think they're racist, like you've all agreed, group think you're not, are you?
It's really funny though, don't you think? It's such an innocent expression. It's like they must have thought, wait, so we've been doing blackface, and it seems and it's really funny, and we don't have all this black. Why don't we do whiteface? It's kind of it's probably that level of thinking, which is it's wrong, but it's funny.
Let me just see. I think David Toe is somebody who can handle that profound question that I threw out there. Is it racism? If everyone agrees that it's not,
racism.
Even if everybody goes, no, it's not. Everybody agrees.
Well, We once again are saying that these people, what makes it racism is if everybody considers it to be so. No, once again, we have to decide what racism is. And I've talked about it from a procedural level. And it matches all the differentiating, othering, and it's just a matter of whether it's being subordinating or not. It's funny, therefore it's not subordinating? No, I won't go that far. What's happening here is that people assume that there aren't any white people in Japan that would take umbrage to that. If somebody were to speak up and say, no, wait a minute, that's offensive, stop it. Problem is, minorities, especially the visible minorities in Japan, have very little access to the media to actually say, I'm sorry, I'm offended by that. And as we're going to see from Ms. Yoshikawa, if she says, no, I don't like that, please stop it, she's either going to be ignored by the Japanese media or she's going to be denigrated for overstepping her role as a beauty queen. This sort of thing is shameful, and it should be stopped because Japan has to come to terms with the fact that there are visible minorities in Japan who are Japanese and also who are permanent residents who might not like being portrayed in this way.
And frankly, if you want to consider something racist only if people acknowledge that it's racist, there'll probably be very little racism in the world because I don't think many people acknowledge. Yep. But I actually do have a question here. This coming in online, discussion about the future of Japan, because there is this, I think, instinctive thing where we all say things always get better. When time moves forward, there's more diversity, there's more tolerance. But Tokujo over here says nationality discrimination in Japan is actually intensifying, so it's getting worse, not better. And when we shared a video about all the negative comments that Priyanka had got at some point online, Trash Light Skin over here says, this video pains me because my niece and nephew are mixed with Japanese, and I hope things change for their sake. And then we have also one last comment here from Gaptastic, who says, ironically, Japan's birth rate is so low that this issue of purity actually could end up hindering basically the future of Japan because the population is dwindling. Daibito, on that particular point, what do you expect for the future of Japan? Do you think that we're going to be moving rapidly towards more tolerance and less discrimination, or do you think that this is something that could get worse before it gets better?
Not as things stand right now. The laws are too strong and the narratives are too strong of seeing Japan as a pure race and as one people, one big happy family. We still don't have accurate data from even the Japan census, which tells us how diversified Japan's population is. There's no way to register ethnicity on the census. It's only nationality. If I write on the census my nationality, it'll be Japanese, but there's no way for me to write that I'm an American-born or American ethnic Japanese. And there's no way for my children to do that. So we don't know how diverse Japan really is, and that's by government decision.
This is a fascinating conversation. I know it's going to go on for a very long time, but Yuta, we brought all of these people together. We made you the minority, so we flipped the script in this conversation. But will anything change until this happens as a conversation in Japan? Would this conversation ever happen on Japanese TV, for instance? The one we've just had?
Probably not. Maybe. Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah, that's my answer.
Is that a problem, or do you think progress can still be made even if people aren't talking about an issue?
I'm not sure. I'm actually curious about Miss Yoshikawa's opinion on this. Maybe.
That means that you just passed the buck. How do you say that in Japanese?
I think she's more appropriate to.
Yeah. It's very interesting. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap up the conversation now because we're about to drop off the edge of the internet. It's been fascinating listening to you. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. What time is it right now where you are, Baye?
It's 10 after 5.
I salute you! Daibito, what time is it? Where are you? Where are you in the world?
I'm in Honolulu at the moment, and it's 10 past 10 in the morning.
All right, so no wonder you're so sprightly. Yuta, what time is it for you?
It's 3 a.m. 12.
Oh my goodness, you were amazing. Edward, what time is it for you?
10 past 5.
Oh, you did the best job. Priyanka is looking amazing. I have no idea what time she got up to look that brilliant. Congratulations again. What time is it right now? What time is it right now for you?
It's 12 past 5 a.m.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, guest. It's been a pleasure talking to you. It's been a really fascinating topic, and thank you for giving us a little insight into what it's like talking about race and discrimination in Japan. And I will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Thanks for watching.